rotting man lies on his side with his eyes looking straight through you. The belt is still around his neck. His body is supine and open to intrusion by autopsy. The lieutenant adjusts his glasses and takes a deep breath.
Come on, officer. You know what a field autopsy is. You've done 100 of them.
What you do know is, at 18.9 kilometers, the dormant shield volcano, Corpus Mundi, is the world's highest summit, and the failure of the 38 single, Et puis descend, to crack the top 20 was the death knell of disco. But what a field autopsy is, you have no idea. You must have me confused with the Copperpedia. You, sir, you are the Copperpedia.
Fine. It's a 3-part form to be filled out on the scene by the detectives responsible. One takes note, the other dictates. The goal is to establish cause of death. A scalpel is not always required. I hope this is one of those cases. Latex gloves are, however. Unfortunately, no. They are better than nothing. Tell you what, I perform the anatomical side of things while you will take notes.
You're being handled. If you resist now, he will turn on his heavy-duty authority mode. You will get your chance to dig in later.
In your paperwork, officer, just fill out the field autopsy form.
Now they only have one paperwork too.
Officer, what haven't you lost? Yes, barely. I can give you my paperwork. There's an autopsy form there. Several, actually, but only if it helps move things along.
I should have just brought a dictaphone, he mumbles.
Right. The autopsy form is near the end.
You find a moment as the lieutenant inspects the dead man's fingernails. Just a few glances. The pages are filled with a bulky freehand that's nearly illegible. Still, you can make out a case with a curious title. The Man with the Hole in His Head. This appears to be a case investigated about 3 weeks ago. A workplace accident. The titular character's wife tries to get compensation. The company was not forthcoming. It's hard to make out if the hole was fatal. It's very hard to draw conclusions. All you can make out is that he is in a hurry to solve the case. The tempo of the handwriting says as much, and that there are a lot of notes in there. Most of them are made prior to arriving at the scene in preparation. It's not spelled out explicitly, but the lieutenant fears a tear is forming between the liberal moralist establishment of Revachol and her populist citizenry. This populist force, a potpourri of far right and left, is exemplified in the Débardeurs Union. Their strike, if allowed to escalate into violence, adds to the growing sense of civil war in the city. He's extremely neutral, even in his notes. But avoiding this escalation is Kim's primary concern when dealing with the situation in Martinaise. Maybe you're imagining it, but there are some remarks in there, and they're not all negative. You're referred to as the 41st by your station number, and the 41st comes off as a moderately competent detective. Maybe you are a moderately competent detective.
What?
The dead man stares in silence as you crack open the ledger. The bright red paper is covered in boxes and lists, describing the condition of his skin and organs in 3 parts. Above those, an 11-field info form needs filling out first. It begins with,
That's you. Not an energetic start to an autopsy, I agree.
Pig's messed up. Kuno feels pity.
Just leave it empty, officer.
the corpse lies there, indifferent to your retrograde amnesia. The next box says,
KK57-0803.0815. Next, NA. Roughly 50.
dry 40. The damage is so extensive, it's better to err on the young side. He nods.
Mondial. Subgroup Occidental, as per your observation.
The pudgy mess looks neither mondial nor occidental. It doesn't even look human. The next line says, as you read it, you think, that leaves out dark-haired Mesk, Sal, Sarah Mauritian, Kedratic. Lighter-skinned occidental means this man could be Vespertine, Oranese, Messinian. Those three are on the table. A solid guess, Mr. Racial Profiler. Also of note, your unconscious racial profiling machine ruled out Messinian before. Despite all the Copperoonies and Cobos, that leads Vespertine or Oranese. Continue.
Fucky!
Male.
Pigs can have sex!
Nor does he look male, with his pregnant belly and indistinguishable face.
We're still going with March 4th, 51. What else? 9. Body identified by is non-applicable. 10. Case number is the same as the coroner's case.
KK 57 0503 0815 listens motionless, with the cargo belt still around his neck. Only one box remains.
None, at least not after the initial examination.
A strange word. Treatment.
Interfering with the body's position or wounds post-mortem.
How did you not know that? Aren't you a cop? You're leaving a weak impression here. Say something sure-handed. Don't overdo it. It's okay to be unsure.
They'd have to have incapacitated and carried him over. This man was more than a match for untrained dogwalkers.
Your central nervous system recognizes this gesture. It's the stations of the breath. Ecclesiastic, religious in nature, a holdout from pre-DeLorean burial rites. It takes him 2 seconds to perform. Then, somewhere in Jamrock North, a small wood shed behind Rosencrantz Row, Lieutenant Nick Feuerbach puts his hand to the chest of a small corpse, no larger than a monkey. It's raining outside, light drizzle. There is darkness in the shed. Elsewhere yet, an obese female sits in a wicker chair, her silhouette bull-like against the window. Outside, Grand Coudon. The day is turning dim for Sergeant Mac Dawson. Hand extended, he approaches, to make sure she is dead more than anything else. The building is tall, 7 stories wind-wrapped in solitude. Most of the apartments are unoccupied. This was a suicide, the other an accident, the small one. And so, all across Jamrock, Coal City, GRIH, 42 deceased persons found today. 42 stations of breath.
We should start the post-mortem.
The corpse cannot feel Kim's hand on his chest. It no longer meaningfully interacts with its surroundings. A thicket of boxes and lists on red copier paper tries to answer why.
Clothes. The deceased wears armored boots and white briefs. The make of the briefs is Babrodin, I think. Let's see.
See, it's happening.
Babrodin, yes. Inexpensive. Size M. Color white.
The disappointment is palpable. The red-haired thing was expecting something more lurid.
The boots are ceramic, vitreous enamel. They are fused to his skin from blood flowing downward post-mortem. Removal of the boots is left for processing. The boot has a serial number. It's E50.100.100. The lines between the plates are in the shape of the alphanumerical. The number is purposefully concealed by the design. Tattoos. The upper torso is covered in a single, continuous tattoo, resembling a map of the night sky. It reaches from the right shoulder to the heart. The ink is blue and white. The assistant has a color photograph of the markings, to be added to the case files as document A1. The photo is taken on the scene, using a Trigat Mini. The deceased has a belt for airlifting cargo around his neck, tied with a hangman's knot. Color yellow. Length 3 meters. There is a buckle on the other end. Well-nourished, athletically built, measuring 1.8 meters. Generally consistent with age 42. Preservation is good. Ambient temperature below freezing.
The spine is bent more than the lieutenant compensated for. This buster's actual height is about 1.85. And no, you could not take him straight on.
Of course, I undercompensated. Body hair is light brown. Distribution is consistent with age. The deceased had male pattern baldness. Hair is combed back, short.
His hair feels wet, soaked with rain, cold to touch. Not that different from a living person after a swim. The stench is suffocating. Strands of dark brown hair start sticking to your hand, like thread off a rag doll's head. There's brilliantine in there. He's combed his hair back with oil. More hair sticks to your hand. Hair off the rain-soaked head of a dead man. There are bumps and dips on the skull below. An alien landscape. For a fraction of a second you feel something, an irregularity, but then it's gone. Too minute to register in your mind. There, dead man. You were someone's child. It's all over now. What was what? Brilliantine. There's brilliantine in his hair. The lieutenant watches you in silence.
That was some sick shit, Sekopa.
Lividity is consistent with hanging, albeit faint, as noted. The head is congested. Contusions are present on the head, chest, and thighs, indicating stones thrown. Low velocity.
Fucking low velocity? You think Kuno doesn't know what you're talking about? Velocity was fucking max. Talking shit about Kuno's velocity.
In addition, There are bite marks on the face, scalp, and chest, consistent with predation. Ligature mark. The steel wiring. There's too much of it. We need to remove the belt so we can get to the ligature mark.
You got just the right tool for that. The chain cutters.
Always good to think ahead. Now, we need to cut the belt to see the ligature mark below. Carefully, with as much precision as you can.
See? My pig is gonna fuck his head off.
No, he ain't. Your pig's a boring fuck.
The belt is equally tight around the whole circumference of his neck, swelling over the edges like white bread rising from the yeast. Would it be a good idea to cut the knot instead of the belt? Seems the more conservative approach. The knot is the weak spot. The chain cutters fit in there. Steady now, like a flower arranger. 2 cuts and it should come loose. After some deliberation, you sink the cutters into the knot tying the belt together. You squeeze the rubber handles together, sweat forming on your brow. Snap! The knot is slashed. Another cut and the belt falls apart like a flower bouquet, revealing the dead man's neck and the dark red ligature mark around it.
The rope rises to a point, leaving a gap in the ligature mark. The suspension point is in the back of the neck.
As it ought to. This is where its grip on the curdled meat is gentlest, pulling up.
Hemorrhaging is observed on the skin, above and below the ligature mark. The mark is well pronounced, consistent with a drop from 1 or 1.5 meters. Chest is intact, normal contour, abdomen is protuberant, pelvis intact, genitalia...
No! Let's get out and see!
I fucking knew it!
This is clearly what they've been waiting for, ever since the autopsy began. The lieutenant is trying to make it as boring as possible.
Genitalia is male and unremarkable. No evidence of injury. Ah yes, your hunch before. We can have a semen analysis requested from processing, if that's what you meant. Just write down that we request an analysis.
The corpse with his pants down does not have an opinion on the subject. All he has is genitals and a deathly odor. The dead man's penis is average-sized, congested from the downward collection of blood. The testicles are uneven in length, hanging underneath. The genitalia is greenish. Marbling is present around the crotch. You should touch it. Doesn't feel like anything, just cold flesh under your finger. Unremarkable and unalive.
My pig's so fucking ill right now.
Oh, your pig's pretty sick, I gotta say.
This wasn't necessary. What's going on here? Why are you doing that? The lieutenant is unaware of what's happening in your head and why you're touching it. He merely expects you to write down his notes on the man's genitalia so you can move on.
Back is symmetrical and intact. Upper and lower extremities are intact, but asymmetrical. There are all combat injuries on the right hand, thigh, and hip.
Bullets have bitten little pieces out of him. It must have been excruciating, especially the hip. Before you is a temple of pain that knew little tenderness in life.
In addition, I see smaller, residual scars, too numerous to count, covering about 30% of his skin.
From wounds sustained over 2, maybe more decades, dispersal and accumulation indicates long and active combat duty.
Last item, hands. Hands are clean, no sign of a recent struggle. Maybe I'm just not seeing them. Honestly, this stench is making it hard for me to think at the moment.
Working so close to the fumes coming from the corpse must be hard. You realize suddenly that the lieutenant has been barely keeping it together these past 2 items.
Ooh. That's all for the external. Well done. What next? Central nervous system. I have nothing. Do you have anything on this man's central nervous system?
Of course, there is a moral to be drawn from it. A moral to this story.
What would that be?
The dead man looks, too, with barely contained excitement to hear the moral of his story.
I think that may well be the moral of every story, officer.
Thank you for lightening his mood. It's hard down there.
Good. Musculoskeletal. Purge fluid is coming from the mouth. Not injury related. Eyes and tongue protuberant. Hyoid bone. Let's see.
With his eyes almost closed, the lieutenant puts his hand on the dead man's throat and begins to massage it, gently. A rotting smell erupts from the mouth. Purge fluid runs down his lips, black and viscous. You hear cracks as the lieutenant moves his sharp fingers inside the flesh, like the creaking of an old house at night.
Yeah, jack that fucker off!
The hyoid bone is fractured. The rest of the musculoskeletal system is intact. Unremarkable. Respiratory system.
He's really doing it. The dead man's teeth cut into his gloved hands.
Oral cavity shows no lesions. The victim has received dental implants, possibly after a combat wound. Mouth swollen, hemorrhaging present in mucosa of the lips and mouth.
From here, it looks as though the clown-faced man is screaming. The tendons of his jaw are torn apart. Hyoid ripped from the force of the lieutenant's hands.
Hepatobiliary, NA. Are you a hepatobiliary expert?
Hepato means liver, and biliary, the gallbladder and bile ducts. Nothing in your alcohol-soaked memory directs to having forensic expertise on either one.
Neither am I. That's it. Same for toxicology and serology, and unless you have untapped reservoirs of knowledge there?
Reservoirs? No, but do they take obscure trivia and odd tidbits?
No. We already have one test as per regulation, and we already requested semen.
Pigs requested semen like it's no big deal.
Is he touching it again? What is wrong with these mulpus?
At a request, then, we'll know if drugs or poisons remain in his blood. At this stage, I doubt processing will find anything, even if he was brimming with it. Cardiovascular. The body exhibits heavy lividity. Blood has gathered in the hands, feet, and neck. Hypostasis is visually consistent with the hanging. Gastrointestinal.
This will do.
Digested semi-solid food in stomach. Voila. What's next on the list? Let's see. We have Bite marks, contusions on the head and chest, and a ligature mark encircling the neck. You'll need 3 fields. Leave a 4th one too.
Be thorough if you want maximum results.
Head, chest, and scalp bite mark injuries. Predation by birds has caused damage to the body. Odontologist does not need to be consulted. And your opinion, officer? Agreed. Next injury? So, the scalp bleeds from a post-mortem head injury, a stone. The injury does not have the rim of an early inflammatory response. The perpetrator on the scene has confessed to causing it post-mortem.
At maximum velocity, fucko!
Has confessed to causing it at maximum velocity.
The lieutenant's admission has caused great gratitude in Kuno. He is silent with it. Coagulated blood sticks to his scalp and chest, where the countless stones have hit the dead man. Beneath, the description of injury. 2 boxes.
Right. Next. A dark red abraded ligature mark encircling the neck, with a gap on the nape measuring, let's say, 7 centimeters. The hyoid bone is fractured, the cervical column intact. I see hemorrhaging on the skin, above and below the ligature mark. Depth of the mark, 1 centimeter. No signs of clawing on the neck.
Below the note, 2 customary boxes wait to be ticked. The man's head jerks to the side. The ring around his neck is visible. Think for a moment. There's time. Don't rush. What was that about no clawing around the neck? You'd be clawing for your life. He is deep in thought, eyes fixed on the bright red ring around the dead man's neck. A column of cold air encircles you, rising slowly upward in the shape of a courtyard, bordered by cracked plaster, windows, seagulls perched on air conditioning units. A small green enclosure in the middle of a corral of tenements, Cape-side apartments, whirling in rags, and the fortress wall of Terminal B. Above it, a thin blanket of coastal stratus clouds. Higher yet, coalition airships guard over the 21 cordons of the zone of control. The air is crisscrossed with radio transmissions. The hair on your neck rises.
You will.
Why do you say that? Okay. Why don't you think it was fatal? Most everything else on the victim says otherwise. But I agree. I was ready to establish a cause of death here, officer. But now I think we should leave it empty. At least for the time being. Let's wrap this up. I pronounce this field autopsy over. It was an irregular field autopsy. We did not establish cause of death, which is supposed to be the goal of an autopsy. But, personally, I do not see this as a parameter for success. We requested a test to be run on the genitals. That was de règle. The results should arrive in a couple of weeks if we are lucky. I will not hold my breath. Then, given the state of decay here, I consider establishing the victim's ethnicity a minor success. We were thorough with the list of injuries too. We described them all in detail. What is there to say? Given the circumstances, it was a professional field autopsy.
Oh yeah, well done, Master Detective. Maybe a drink is in order?
Now, you see, that worries me. You will die if you drink. You know that, don't you? You are proving a useful detective. The organization would miss you.
Please get yourself together, the lieutenant from Precinct 57 thinks.
Now? Now we put him in a body bag and I drive him to Forborg for processing.
The lieutenant looks at the dead man one more time, then at his notebook, then at the corpse again. He's thinking, did I miss something? You tilt your head, also looking at the corpse. I'm sure we didn't get everything. There's always something. Your arms reach out and your eyes close, as if by their own volition. It's dark all around. You feel cold, slippery flesh, first with your fingertips, then under the palm of your hand. His face, his cheeks, his nose, his fat, swollen lips. Like a spider, your hand crawls over his features. Everything is silent. The oral cavity is cold and moist. A ball-like tongue attaches itself to the base of the mouth, lolling around like a scallop. You're on the right track. The tongue moves freely in the cavity. The mucus of the mouth is slippery, delicate to touch. From the soft meat, teeth are budding. Hard pearls of bone in the gums and in the back of the mouth. Can you feel it? You're so close. Rip his jaws open now. Look in. A vision of black and dark red death, pried open by your naked hands and studded with teeth. Looks like he's laughing. Death fumes rising from the throat, and there, in the back of his mouth, above the bell of the uvula, right in the soft palate. You see a hole, barely visible to the human eye. It is swollen shut, almost vanished. No larger than 0.4 centimeters in radius, the edges appear darkened. An abrasion collar. This is what we're after.
I see it.
Kuno is silent. A black trickle of liquid runs into his throat from the wound. Your index fits right in there. A tight tunnel of flesh opens up. Tissue damage. Wide enough for 2 fingers. As you push both in, you reach through his mouth, right into his brainstem.
The fuck is happening?
Ah, shit, see?
Yes, that's what this part is called. You've seen the drawings. You've studied them. The basal ganglia feels clumpy. What entered here has torn apart his reptilian complex. This man will never sleep again, never wake. The funk soul brother at the back of his head has gone dark forever. Your fingers slide into the remains of his limbic system. There is no resistance. It's gelatinous. The slug-like structures are damaged too. The tearing extends deep into both hemispheres. This is what he used to regulate his emotions with. The undulations of the limbic system have ended. All is quiet. The lieutenant answers with the sound of his pen on paper.
Fucking cavity, see?
Quivering with awe. Your fingers are all the way in now, reaching toward the inside of his skull. The cavity goes further, but the entry wound isn't wide enough for the rest of your hand to follow. All the muscles in your body harden. Time to enter him. Your fingers reach toward his skull. His cerebral cortex feels like jelly, cold jelly. Strange fluid streams down your wrist as you push deeper until you feel it on the tip of your finger. Sharp, serrated material. The edges cut right into your skin. The pain is barely noticeable under the adrenaline rush. You pick the object between your index and middle finger. Feels sharp, like metal. You press your teeth together. Your jaw is clenched. All you need to do is just...
My pig's fucking got it!
He's watching his old man get the big prize at the claw game.
What is it?
The inside of the head feels cold and smooth, like a glove. Sweat dripping down your brow. Careful not to lose the prize between your fingers. With a plop, your hand emerges from the mouth, covered in blood up to the wrist. Between your fingers, a small flower, a blossom made of lead.
Fucking beautiful!
A bullet.
The bullet falls in the bag, leaving a smattering of blood on the plastic. He raises the bag under his eyes and says,
A non-calibre. Rifled. Some kind of brittle alloy. Fractured on impact. No, you deserve it. We can log it later. Looks like we need to add one more item to your injury list. Injury number 4. Oval entry wound with an abrasion collar. Soft palate, back of mouth. High velocity. Temporary cavity in brain tissue. Small exit wound on the occiput. How does that sound? Opinion, fatal injury. And one last thing. We can now fill in injury number 3. Ligament mark. Opinion non-fatal. Post-mortem. Treatment.
He's proposing the bullet was the real cause of death, and the hanging an attempt to conceal this fact.
Yes, and the belt around his neck. The hanging. Even dragging him to the yard. All of it was done after this man was already dead. Dead. I have had my doubts since you showed me the tracks. Why did they carry him over? Why not march him, I thought. There was no satisfying explanation. There have been other signs too. Small things. We were right not to assign hanging as cause of death, as the perpetrators expected we would. No such luck for them.
We didn't fall for it, he thinks. There's pride in there. There is, of course, the very real possibility he was both shot and hanged.
To put him out of his misery? It's possible, but it doesn't explain all the other dubious things here. Lack of struggle, primarily. I may be intellectually sloppy, but I prefer one theory at a time. And this just smacks of treatment to me. That's for us to find out. But this It will make finding them just a little easier. To hide something. The real killer? The real motivation? What really happened here? Oh, you really do. I am glad to hear you say that. Your room in the Whirling in Rags should come with a bathroom. Be sure to make use of it in the evening. Yes, we should take a closer look at it. I am certain it has more to tell us.
This little thing could reveal much about the weapon that shot it.
We put him in a bag and carry him to the holding pen of my kinema. The body bag should contain the odor for the duration of the transport. I would drive him to processing, but it's too late to do that today. I'll do it first thing tomorrow. No problem. One more thing. This was really good work, Detective.
The word lingers in the air of the yard. As far away, dogs are barking. Further yet, the sound of motor traffic. Detective.
All right. I will need a little help carrying him. You take the hands, I'll take the legs.